What's up, everybody? This is Grant at Cause Artists. Welcome to another episode of the Disruptors for Good podcast. In this episode, we speak with Jon Nevett, CEO of Public Interest Registry, PIR. Jon shares his journey from a legal background to the technology sector, specifically focusing on his role at the Public Interest Registry. He discusses the mission of PIR, which operates the .org domain and supports nonprofits globally. The conversation also highlights the importance of domain names for organizations, the significance of the .org Impact Awards, and the role of ICANN in internet governance. Jon emphasizes the need for a safe and secure domain name system and shares insights on future goals for the organization and the industry. I hope you enjoy the conversation, and we'll talk soon. Well, thank you so much, Jon, for joining me today. Super excited to nerd out a little bit about your journey, PIR, and everything it's doing in the domain space, everything it's doing in the technical space in general. And there's a lot of things we can chat about. Before we get into that, talk a little bit about your journey. Maybe not just the nonprofit industry, but just overall impact industry in general. I guess go back as far as you want.
Thank you, Grant. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate being on the show. Yeah, I don't come from a technology background. I come more from a legal and policy background. And so I graduated law school, clerked for a judge, and then went to a big law firm. I wanted to pay back my student loans. First day on the job, they came to me and said, "You have a choice. You could work on smoking cases, defending a tobacco company,
Sure.
Breast implant cases, defending a chemical company, or trucks that blow up." And I was like, okay. So I took trucks that blew up, did that for a short period of time. And then my real goal, and when I was in law school, what I wanted to do was be a criminal prosecutor. I wanted to go and work in the courthouse and, be a prosecutor for federal crimes. And I had interviewed after some time at the firm with some U.S. attorneys around the Northeast. And I guess as the custom was back then, I never heard back from them. I had a couple of interviews, never heard back. I had a couple of interviews in D.C., hadn't heard back. And then I got a call from a recruiter to go and be a lawyer at a telecommunications company. So I went down that road and pursued it and got the job, and I started working at a telecom company. And my second week there, I got a call that Eric Holder, who was the U.S. attorney in D.C. at the time, wanted to meet me for my final interview. And I had only been there 2 weeks. So I declined. I didn't think it was the right thing to do to, interview after being at a job for 2 weeks. And so I turned it down, and that changed my entire career path. Everything I thought I was going to do when I was in law school. I mean, the internet wasn't very well known when I was in law school. And, telecom was the rage back then in the early 90s. And I went over there and kept on gravitating over towards the business side, followed a number of telecom folks after going through the MCI WorldCom merger and then the WorldCom fraud and bankruptcy. I moved over to the internet domain name space with a number of colleagues. And that was at the point where ICANN, which is the regulator in our space, it stands for the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. Mm-hmm. And they were just starting out and providing competition in the registrar and registry spaces, which those are the entities that help provide domain names and other digital presence for everyone. Yeah. And so I moved over there in the early 2000s, and the rest is history for me because I just love the industry. It's been wonderful to me, and I've done various jobs in the industry. Now I'm moving, for the last 6 years, I've been at Public Interest Registry. We operate .org and what we call the .org family of domains. So .charity, .gives, .giving, .foundation, .ong, .ngo. And we are a nonprofit ourselves. So we operate the nonprofit that runs .org, and it's been great.
Amazing. I mean, it's such a fascinating arena that we sort of play in. I love domain names. I'm always like looking them up, seeing what's available, like buying some. It's just, I used to collect like baseball cards as a kid. Now, like kind of collect domain names as a hobby. So it's super fun, and been in the impact arena for so long. And, I've always been a fan of .orgs, and I think it's sort of this sort of gold standard in cause related, obviously missions and sort of visions, not just nonprofits, but we had spoke before we call on here like Microsoft.org does it for its foundational things, and there's just I think Salesforce.org does it as well for sort
Google
of
as well. Yeah, there are
Google,
a lot of corporate social responsibility sites that folks use .org. So you don't have to be a 501c3 or equivalent in other countries, but it could be anyone who's doing good. And if you're mission driven, it could be your local, my daughter's soccer team, or any kind of group or family group or individual that if you want to do good, you should look at a .org. You're right; it is the gold standard.
So, Public Interest Registry. What's its overall sort of mission and vision? I guess for people who don't know what it is, and I guess what was it maybe before you came on board, and what is it like now? Has sort of the mission and North Star changed, or has it stayed the same from when you first joined to now?
So most people don't know that there's an entity that runs each what's called top-level domain. So .org or .com or .net or .edu, they're run by an entity. And instead of recreating the telephone system where we all remember numbers and we have to dial a number, the domain name system converts a name into a number. So grant.org is converted into an IP address, a number that's recognized on the internet. And there could only be one authoritative database that says this name converts to this number. And so the one entity, the registry operator, controls that database that says this name converts to that number and is recognized on the internet. And we also, if you go to your browser and put in a .org or any of our other names, we ensure that it resolves to the right site. So we make sure that it works, right? So running a registry is, we want to make sure it's safe and secure, and the internet infrastructure works. So anyone who's operating .org, we help them ensure that their site is safe and secure. And so you're talking about the largest nonprofits in the world, and you're talking about could be the smallest soccer teams in the world. But we make sure that their technology works. So people can find them and they can do their work, and their digital presence succeeds. And so, what we do is not only that, but as a nonprofit ourselves, we have two major functions. One is we help support an entity called the Internet Society. So about 60 cents of every dollar we take in, we contribute to the Internet Society. And so they do amazing work with providing access to the internet around the world. Okay. There are places in the U.S. you still don't have access to the internet, which is crazy to think about, right? And they provide security and stability of the internet, free and open internet governance issues. They provide grants for folks that are doing amazing things on the internet. So it's a wonderful organization. I kind of use the analogy sometimes that we run the museum bookstore. And so we're selling products and services to folks, and they come in and they buy great stuff, and we contribute 60 cents of every dollar that we take into the Internet Society, which is very heartwarming for us because we see the great that they do with it. Yeah. Now, if Coca-Cola gave 60 cents of every dollar to the Internet Society, it wouldn't make it a nonprofit. So what makes us a nonprofit is not only do we do that, but we have our own nonprofit mission. So there are two parts of our nonprofit mission that we support. One is we want to make sure the entire domain name system is safe and secure and improved. And the more we could do to improve the state of what's called the DNS, so the domain name system, the better. So we work on that. And then the second part is we engage with nonprofits and other mission-driven entities that are doing great work, and we work with them to improve their digital identity and what they do. So it's kind of a education and other services for nonprofits. So our biggest program we just had this week is called the .org Impact Awards. Yep. And so where we celebrate .orgs that are doing amazing things around the world. So we have our own nonprofit mission. We support the Internet Society. We support the industry that we work in. And then we support mission-driven entities that are doing amazing work on .org.
Let's stick on the awards for a second. Mm-hmm. What's that process like? I guess how long you've been doing it, and sort of what are the benefits of sort of winning it? What kind of, I guess, do they get some services? Do they get a grant? Just talk about that.
All of the above. So interestingly, nice. This is our 6th annual .org Impact Awards. We had one in person, and then we had 3 virtual because of the pandemic. And now we're back in person, and we had our awards program this past week. And it was hosted by Alan Cumming, who is an Emmy Award-winning actor and Tony Award-winning actor. So he's great, and he's a philanthropist as well, and he's been doing some great work on his philanthropic activities have been very strong, and we were happy to have him celebrate the winners and the finalists of the awards. So this year we started taking applications. I think it was back in May. We received, I think, 1,800 applications.
Wow.
And then it's in 7 different categories.
Okay.
Everything from food and hunger to education to health and healing, the environment, and others. And then we have one category which is really fun for what we call rising stars. So those are for folks 25 and under who have started a nonprofit or work in a nonprofit, and they're our rising stars, which is always the most fun people to interact with. And so of 1,800 applications, only 2% become finalists. So you could think that these are the best of the best. They're amazing organizations. And I feel badly for the ones that were just below the line because they probably are, I know they are as amazing as well. But, I don't envy the judges who make these decisions, but they do. And we invite all 35 finalists to an event in Washington, D.C. It was in the International Spy Museum this year, which was kind of fun because Alan Cumming was in Spy Kids. He was the who we thought was the evil leader trying to take over the world, and the fact that the Spy Kids antagonist was the host in the Spy Museum in DC was kind of fun. Anyway, so each of the finalists get a cash award. They get marketing services. They get to come to the event. They network with all the other finalists and winners. And then at the event, we announced the winner of each category, and then one of each of the category winners is selected for the .org of the year.
Oh, wow.
And this year, the .org of the year was is Yellow Boat of Hope Foundation. And it's an amazing organization. It started in the Philippines because they wanted to solve a problem. They had kids. I forget, thousands of islands are the Philippines are comprised of thousands of islands, and there are kids in some of the remote islands that had to swim to school. They literally, had to wade through water and actually swim, holding up their, materials and their uniforms, and they swam to school, arriving all wet.
Interesting.
And this nonprofit started saying, you know what, we're gonna create a yellow boat, kind of like a school bus, but on the water.
Yeah.
And they created a yellow boat where they started taking kids to school. They're now up to 5,000 yellow boats where they're taking kids to school. They've also started actually building schools in some of the remote locations and providing other services to help the access to education.
Wow.
And we were all taken by the amazing. Yeah, it is. It's an amazing group. They were the .org of the year. They got a $50,000 grant and a whole lot of press. If you look up the Yellow Boat of Hope Foundation, they've now actually are moving into Indonesia as well, island nation, and they're doing similar work there as well. So great organization, great people. And the other one of the finalists
Yellowboat.org, just the
Yellowboat.org.
Great
exactly.
Domain. Great
Yellowboat.org, a great domain for sure. Another organization is providing underground education in Afghanistan for girls. Where there are restrictions on education for women and girls. One of them was creating operating rooms with generators, so kids could get operations in certain countries that didn't have the best facilities when it came to energy and lighting. And if it's one thing if your lights go out, when you're doing watching TV or something or reading. It's another thing if you're operating on someone.
Yep.
And so they created there are other health and healing, other economic support groups and environmental support groups. So it's just the best of the best. I encourage everyone to go to the .org Impact Awards .org and check it out and see the different winners that were announced. So it was a great event, and that's the best part of my job is to be able to celebrate these amazing change makers who are doing great work. And that was the .org Impact Awards, and that's part of our nonprofit mission. We do all that.
Amazing. Yeah, we'll definitely link to that. Like it's just super sick, man. I love that.
Now, why do we have the other ones? .charity, .foundation, .gives, .giving. I'll give an example. Let's say you run your site, you're a nonprofit, you run your site in .org, and you go to their main site, and let's say you're doing something on clean water.
Okay.
Your whole site's going to be about clean water and all the great work you're doing about clean water. But let's say you wanted to have a marketing campaign to raise money, right? So you might want to use .giving and point to the part of your site about donations where you're doing your fundraising. So no one gets distracted, and they go straight to the .giving part of your site, and you take the donation. So let's say you had an email campaign on, you don't need any backslashes and some long name. You just have cleanwater.giving or whatever the name of your organization is, Grants Foundation.giving, and you go to the giving and you use that. Let's say you wanted to have a lot of these are complements, right?
Yeah.
So
I see.
You're not limited to one domain name. You could have, like you say, you collect them, right? So a nonprofit could collect domain names and do different things with each one, even though it's the same site, but you can move to that part of the site. You could also use domain names for email. So if you want a more professional email, you want to use your name.org or your name.giving or charity, as opposed to, no offense to my friends at Google, but a generic Gmail account or Yahoo account or something like that.
Yep.
The domain name use could be broader. So what we call the .org family of domain names, .charity, .foundation, .gives, .giving, ONG, NGO, they're all out there for folks to use if they want to complement their original .org site.
I just will say, from like a publisher and just a person like creating content in the space, when I get sort of pitched on stories or topics, I look at the email address. I know it's weird, but I do think it's a professionalism thing where if you are really passionate about what you're doing, if you're really, really going to dedicate your time and you're going to be serious about something, it's pretty inexpensive, to professionalize your organization or your foundation, whatever it is, or your college just in general. So I do look at that. Like when people pitch, it's like, if they have if it is an organization or something, it's, maybe their email is still a Gmail or something, then I don't know that it is that serious. Right. And so maybe I'll say, hey, maybe the time's not right now. Maybe you need to be a little bit further along in the mission, and professionalize just a little bit. And so I do look for that, and I'm not necessarily saying that's right or wrong, but I do.
No, you're not alone. It makes sense. Having a .org gives you the trustworthiness and credibility that you would expect. All the most of the major nonprofits use .org. You have a list on your site of 30 up and coming folks. I looked earlier; 28 of them are in .orgs. So and we'll contact the other two soon. So it is where people who are doing good like to reside and promote that digital identity, because it does say something, whether it's in the United States or around the world. So around the world, you have country codes, the 2-character ones that you often see that are very popular there as well. But .org is incredibly very popular around the world as well.
I want to go back to ICANN for a second and maybe talk a little bit about, policy. And this kind of takes you back in your previous profession and career. But what has maybe changed, gotten better, or needs to get better from a policy standpoint?
That's a really broad question, but an important one, right? So internet governance is handled by a lot of different entities. Yeah. So you have the UN looking at various internet governance issues. There's a process right now called the WSIS plus 20. WSIS happened 20 years ago, and they're relooking at it to see, how do you regulate the internet? How do you regulate the domain name space when it's cross-border? There's no jurisdictions. And what we want to do is avoid some kind of patchwork quilt of regulation that makes it impossible to do business internationally. It's one internet, one world, right? And ICANN was set up in the late 1990s, and it was we kind of call it a quasi-government entity, but it's not. Each country gets a seat at ICANN in something called the GAC, or the Government Advisory Committee. Yeah. And so there's a little mini UN going on at ICANN, and they have a big say in what's going on, but it's also what's called a multi-stakeholder model. So other stakeholders have a say in how to develop policy. Whether it's business or civil society or government, we all get together, 3-4 times a year in different locations, and we meet about policy issues. And, one of the biggest policy issues is what do we do about new top level domains? So, like we mentioned, we have the .org and the .org family. There was a round of applications in 2012. So we're talking about 12 years ago, where ICANN opened it up for applications to create new ones, and about 1,000 new ones came into being, whether it was .charity or .foundation or .plumbing or .beer. Right. Those two exist. And if you're a plumber and you want to get your .plumbing name, great. If you're a mission-driven entity and you want to get your .charity name or .foundation name, great. You could do that. They're working on, and we're working on, policies for the next round of applications, and the plan is for 2026. So a couple of years from now, there'll be another round of applications. And it's not easy to run a registry, and the application fee is not inexpensive. So it's over $200,000 just to apply, and you're not guaranteed to get it.
Crazy.
But if you have a name that is of interest, what are the rules around that? What are you looking at community, or, if someone wanted to apply for something that's objectionable, where should it be objectionable though? Something objectionable in one country might not be objectionable in another country. And you can think through some of those names. So that's a lot of the policy work that happens, relates to new top level domains. Another thing is something that we're leaders on is anti-abuse work. So we created a foundation or an institute called the Net Beacon Institute, where we help improve the state of the DNS and fight anti-abuse. So if you have phishing attacks, for example, you could report it to us, and we'll make sure that it gets to the right person and they have the right information, the right organization. And we provide data so people could look at what's happening in the internet and see where there are problems. So we want to fight abuse. One thing we've recently done is worked with a wonderful nonprofit in the United Kingdom called the Internet Watch Foundation. So the Internet Watch Foundation does probably one of the hardest jobs I know of. They look for and try to address child imagery abuse or child sexual abuse material online. Unfortunately, it's the internet, and being open for all means that there's going to be some bad apples, right? And so we want to make sure that .org is clean of any child sexual abuse material. And so we work with the Internet Watch Foundation, and they crawl our sites to make sure that there's no known cases of child sexual abuse material. And the alternative is some folks say, well, content's not our problem, right?
Sure.
Go get a court order, and we'll look at it and take it down if the court orders us to do that. And we think there are some instances of content, very few. You could go to a hosting company for content and others, but on the level that we operate, something like child imagery abuse is something that we do want to take care of and make sure that we're clean. And so we did a partnership with the IWF to make sure that not only .org was clean, but every registry they didn't have a relationship with. We're now funding them to make sure the entire registry community is addressing child imagery abuse online. And so that's something out of our nonprofit mission that we're happy to do. The less of that online, the better. And the more we could do to improve that state, we're happy to do that. Those are the kinds of policy issues that we deal with, and the anti-abuse issues that we deal with. From a ICANN perspective, I think the biggest change will be in 2026 when they have a whole nother round of top level domains. One thing they did recently at our urging was to add a provision in the contracts for both registries and the retail registrars that when they see some kind of domain name service abuse, they have to do something about it. in the prior contracts, they could just collect information. Oh yeah, there's DNS abuse going on, and they don't do anything about it. We wanted to make sure that registries and registrars had some affirmative obligation to do something in the face of abuse.
I wanted to was that your time during the Obama administration, the Online Safety and Technology Working Group?
No, this is more recent. I was on a panel during the Obama administration where there was a task force on keeping children safe on the internet. And so this has been a long-standing issue for me. And, that obviously was in the 2008 to 2016 range. It was later. It was probably, in 2009-10 timeframe. And we did some good work there and issued a report. And so there are different ways to attack folks who are jeopardizing the safety of children online. Platforms have a role to play, a big role to play. If it's something on Facebook or some other platform, Instagram, they have an obligation to do stuff. And then, at different layers, the hosting company should be doing some stuff, and on the registrar and then registry level, we should be doing some stuff as well.
I'll end a little bit on the future. And, obviously you had mentioned, I think, was it 2027 or 2026 for the new set of applications for top level domains, but also from just an organization perspective, over the next maybe 3 to 5 years, what do you and the team would like to achieve? What are some of the goals and successes you'd like to see?
Yeah, I have an amazing team. We're relatively small but mighty, and the work that we do in our own nonprofit mission is really exciting and really fun, whether it's the .org Impact Awards or we do some features with certain nonprofits that are doing great work or community groups that are doing great work, and we'll feature them on a video. As an organization, we operate both as a business, right? We sell domain names and do well doing that. And then we funnel the money back to the Internet Society and to our own nonprofit mission. And so I think it's very fulfilling. You think of the mission and what we're working on, but also, that's important work. But and it's interesting because the 40% of Gen Z employees, I saw a statistic the other day, 40% of Gen Z employees, they rank a sense of purpose at work as more important than a paycheck, which is amazing. And I'm not sure my generation would say the same thing. But as folks are entering the workforce, I want to make sure that they have a compelling and a mission-driven philosophy. And my philosophy on leadership has always been there's a Teddy Roosevelt quote that essentially no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. So if you have a workforce and you invest in your people and you give them a good mission and you give them flexibility and you keep them in the front of your mind when you're doing your work, you'll have a very happy organization. And obviously we're not perfect. Everyone has bumps in the road, but I think if we're working together as a team, we can do amazing things. And the other night in the Org Impact Awards, it reminds us, why are we doing what we're doing? It just provided energy and, for me, a motivation to keep it up and keep doing these things. I've been in the domain name industry for a very long time in different capacities. I was at a registrar, then I did a startup in 2000 for the 2012 round, and now for 6 years I've been doing the nonprofit work related to the industry, and I couldn't be happier or more thrilled in the work that we're doing and what we see in the future. So you'll see some new TLDs, you'll see some Web3 TLDs that probably could come out. Creating the rules for those are interesting and helpful. And, the more we could stamp out DNS or domain name system abuse, the better. The more we could deal with, the bumps of the road, the better. And, but I'm very optimistic for the future for the industry. And, everyone, like you say, everyone needs a domain name. And if you want to be professional and do great work, as a mission-driven entity or group, you're welcome to, register.org, and we'd love to have you.
Every .org has a story, and I think that is what I like to look for. And obviously Yellow Boat's a really cool example, but those 35 others you had at the award show, like, I'm sure everybody's story was incredible. And I think I'm always emphatic, and I tell people, like, your domain name is more than I think what you think it is. Usually and obviously then your website after that, but it's going to be the first interaction that the world has with you usually, whether it's a nonprofit or your business. It's going to be the first time people interact with you. And so, if you go to a restaurant, where, their sign outside has, it's nighttime and maybe only 3 of their lights work on the letters of their business, and it's kind of blinking, and, you walk inside and like there's a couple lights on and maybe it smells bad, like you're probably going to walk out. And it's the same thing with like websites and domain names. Like if it looks a certain way, people will stay longer. They will interact with, your content and your mission a lot more. And so I always just recommend people professionalize, a little bit. Like we said, I mean, it's not that much of an expense. Usually a domain is, $10 initially, and then maybe it's like $15 a year to keep registering it. So
yeah, that's exactly right.
The cost is so small compared to the output that it gives. And again, it's just my personal opinion, but yeah, that's how I look.
I share it for the cost of a couple cups of coffee in a year.
Mm-hmm.
You get your domain name and you get your web presence, and you could really stand out based on what you're doing. And we're creating a community of .orgs. Yeah. And whether we're celebrating the best of the best in a given year through our impact awards, or, we're just making sure it works well and safe and secure. And, our brand is in every one of their names, right? So if you're running grantsfoundation.org is our brand, and that's in your name. And we want to make sure it's safe, it's secure, it works well, and it's trustworthy, and it sends the right message to the community. And we think we do that, and we're thrilled to have more folks using .org, and anything we can do to help, we're happy to do that.
Thank you so much, Jon. This was awesome conversation. It was great to learn about your journey, and obviously, as I mentioned as many times, I love the domain name sector, and it's always awesome to talk to a fellow person who loves domain names, and glad we got to have the conversation, and so best of luck to you and the team for the next decade.
Appreciate it, Grant. Thanks for having me, and thanks for all you do.